Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, fixing Florida State for the 2025 season. That's really the only conversation that's taken place within the Florida State fan community, and it's really the only thing that's worth talking about. I mean, you look at the 2024 season, the disaster it's been. I'm a Michigan fan, and so I'm kind of in the same boat with my Michigan Wolverines, where we're looking at and saying, I don't really care what the results are on the football field over the next couple of weeks. The mentality, the conversation is what needs to happen over the next couple of months to get this Florida State program back to its winning ways in 2025. I got a laundry list of things in front of me that I want to talk about. And I think more importantly, to the Florida State fans, it's going to be a busy offseason, right? We expect there to be significant coaching changes. We expect there to be significant roster turnover. That's really the only way that you can go about addressing the problem. We're going to have a lot of these conversations. This is kind of just kicking off it. So would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. I'm sure many Florida State fans have a lot of different opinions on a lot of different aspects about this program. We're going to be taking a lot of what y'all say in the comment section. That's going to be the talking points for the next couple of weeks. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Man, the Florida State fans, y'all know I have a blast talking this program, and it's been not so fun to talk about over the last couple of weeks. In fact, we haven't really talked a ton of Florida State football, but y'all continue to show a ton of love. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Going to be busy next couple of months for this program. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before we even talk about this roster and what needs to change with the roster, I think you got to talk coaching staff first. And look, I see a lot of Florida State fans saying that Mike Norvell should be fired, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that sentiment. I mean, it is inexcusable for how this team looks every single Saturday, but I don't think it's a reality. And I think a lot of Florida State fans understand that. Like, I would be very surprised if Mike Norvell is not the head coach of this program to kick off 2025. The buyout's just too big. Now, that being said, there's a lot of other changes, and there, for lack of better terms, there needs to be consequences for what this team looks like in 2024. And I think those consequences are going to be seen with the coaching staff. And to be quite frank, the coaching staff has been a disaster for Florida State. And you look at the recruiting trail first. I mean, not closing on some of the top prospects that, seemingly have been some layups for Florida State, just not closing. And so this Florida State coaching staff is not recruiting particularly well. But then the development it's been horrible for Florida State. I think one of the biggest examples in the wide receiver room at the offensive line position, where you got a whole offensive line of redshirt seniors who have seemed to have gotten worse over the last 12 months as football players. You can't have that. And how many names can you think of over the last 3 years that Florida State recruited out of high school and developed into good football players? It's just not that many. And so you look at the coaching staff in general, and outside of probably Coach Surtain, I think it might be worth Florida State to completely clean house with the coaching staff, because they're not recruiting the right way and they're not developing the right way. And outside of Coach Surtain, I think you could say that for just about every position coach that we see on this roster. And so although Mike Norvell might not be the one that is quote unquote punished for this performance or facing consequences, I do think the rest of the coaching staff there's going to be some significant shakeups. I don't know if it's going to be a complete clean house, but I think it needs to be pretty damn close if you want to get different results for Florida State in 2025. Now, you talk about the roster. I think the good news for Florida State fans is we're in the modern era of college football with the transfer portal. You can overturn you're not stuck with the roster going into 2025. There can be significant changes that are going to be made. Want to kind of, I think, for lack of better terms, just go through a checklist and talk about position groups that need to be addressed in the transfer portal. And let's start with, I think, the marquee conversation, if you will. That's the quarterback spot. I mean, Mike Norvell and this coaching staff, or just Mike Norvell, because I don't know how much of the coaching staff are going to be back in 2025. It starts with evaluating Brock and Luke. It hasn't been great. I don't think the talent and pieces around them have been, a real good environment for them to thrive. But at the end of the day, Mike Norvell has to know by the end of 2024, do we have a quarterback on the roster that we think we can win with. Whether it's Brockland or whether it's Luke. As of right now, from what I've seen from this Florida State team, you don't. And if you want to see any sort of significant turnaround in 2025, I think you need to go to the transfer portal and grab a quarterback, and it can't be settling. We kind of knew Florida State. We all kind of talked ourselves into Mike Norvell turning around DJU, but at the end of the day, it was clear Florida State wanted Cam Ward. Florida State wanted a couple other quarterbacks before they settled with DJU. You can't let that happen in 2025. And I think Mike Norvell knows that. I mean, if you have another repeat performance in 2024, I don't care what the buyout is. Florida State's going to figure out a way to pay it. And so I think Mike Norvell knows you got to figure out the quarterback position. And if it's not Brock Glennon, it's not Luke, you have to figure out that quickly. And you got to go be proactive in the transfer portal to go grab a quarterback. And so I think that's where it starts. But if you're going to bring in a quarterback, look, it outside of a few elite quarterbacks, I don't even know if it matters if you don't fix this offensive line. And I would expect a new offensive line coach and, quite frankly, Alex Atkins, offensive coordinator in general, to be in. This offensive line has been a disaster. It's one of the worst offensive lines in terms of run blocking and in pass protection. And when you can't run the football, you're finding yourself in a lot of second and third and longs, and then you can't pass protect. You're not going to have an efficient and any sort of good offense. And that's been reflected in terms of the amount of points Florida State's scoring on the offensive side of the football. This is where it gets tricky because you have to replace pretty much your whole starting five. And I think you want to replace your whole starting five. That's going to be hard to do in the transfer portal. Now, I think it starts with figuring out some of the young cats, what guys could potentially be starters for Florida State in 2025, whether it's Jonathan Daniels, Manassi Atiti, Solomon Thomas, Peyton Joseph coming in as true freshmen. I mean, Solomon Thomas is a guy that I think could start early in his Florida State career. You got to figure out what guys you think you can develop into starting caliber offensive linemen in 2025. But it's hard to see Florida State not going out and getting at least 3 to 4 bona fide starting caliber power 4 offensive linemen. It's going to be hard to do, but Florida State's going to have to figure it out because you can't run back anything close to what we've seen from this Florida State offensive line. And I would probably say the same thing in the wide receiver room, where you're going to lose some guys. And this was another kind of talking point with Florida State. They went to the transfer portal, but they didn't get any proven commodities, right? We were fired up about Malik Benson. From what we heard during fall camp, this guy's big body. He's really, really fast. He can work vertically down the field, but it turns out he's just not that good of a football player. And that's what it is. You got to go get some proven pass catchers. And again, I think it starts with trying to retain some of the really talented young cats that you have on this roster. Elijah Moore, LaWayne McCoy, I think are both really good football players. And quite frankly, I think both have bright futures. Hakeem Williams, you got to figure out if there's another gear for him. I mean, this is year 2. You haven't really seen a ton of development. We were all really excited about this kid, and we knew he was raw. Mike Norvell, and especially the experience he has working with wide receivers, he has to make a decision there. Is Hakeem Williams a lost cause, or is he worth seeing what he can do in year 3? We knew it would take a while, but it doesn't seem like there's much progress being made. And so the first conversation is, what do you have on this roster? And then what kind of wide receivers do we need to go in the portal? My take would be it needs to be guys who have proven they can do it at the Power 4 level. And quite frankly, even if it's reaching into the group of 5, I'm not opposed to, and you've seen Florida State do this, and quite frankly, that's where they've had most of their success. I mean, going and getting a guy like Jared Verse or Braden Fisk, guys who have shown they can do it at a lower level, and just have them jump up and see if they can do it at the Power 4 level. You need proven commodities. And so I think the wide receiver room is, again, I think you're addressing pretty much every position group on this roster outside of, I feel like you feel good about Cam Davis. I feel like you maybe feel good about Samuel Singleton. You might want to add another running back too, quite frankly. The only position group I feel pretty good about is the tight end spot with Amari Williams and Landon Thomas. I think those guys will be able to play for Florida State next year. But outside of that, you're probably trying to make at least 1 or 2 moves at every single position group on the offensive side of the football, which you're able to do. And I think there's going to be a lot of roster turnover with this Florida State team. And I don't think the roster turnover is all that bad for Florida State. Like, you need significant changes going on within this program. Going to the defensive side of the football, again, I think there's going to be some significant changes in terms of the coaching staff on the defense. And I think you'll be seeing significant changes in terms of the personnel on this roster as well. You look at the defensive line. It's a defensive line that Florida State clearly invested a lot of money into, and they just missed on their evaluations. And again, you look at a guy like Marvin Jones Jr., very similar to the Malik Benson, a guy that's really physically gifted, hasn't really shown he can play at the college football level yet or the Power Four level yet. You can't be going out to the transfer portal and grabbing guys who are projections. That's what you do at the high school ranks. You don't do that in the transfer portal. What the transfer portal is for, in my opinion, is go grab some proven commodities who've shown they can do it. If they haven't put it together in year 2 or year 3, chances are it ain't coming together in year 4. And so, again, you can take the lottery tickets when you're recruiting the high school ranks. You can't afford to take those lottery tickets in the transfer portal. I feel like Florida State did that with a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. It certainly backfired. Again, linebacker, I think could certainly be a spot. Defensive line for sure. The secondary, I feel like you feel pretty good with guys like Kai Bates and Charles Lester and Conrad Hussey. Quandarius Jones, I think, is an absolute dude. That might not be a position that you got to target, but pretty much every other spot for Florida State, it's got to get addressed. And I think it's going to be a really busy next couple of weeks and months for Florida State. My take on the situation is you can't get rid of Mike Norvell. I just don't think financially it makes much sense or financially even possible for Florida State. So you're going to stick with Mike Norvell. If you're going to do that, you got to make significant changes to the coaches around him. And this is kind of the fork in the road for Mike Norvell. Look, there's a lot of things that we all like about Mike Norvell. Tough decisions and hard decisions when you are the head coach of a program like Florida State, you got to make them. And at the end of the day, Mike Norvell has to evaluate this whole program, identify what has gone wrong over the last 12 months, and make those changes, even if it's hard. And I think they got to address how they go and address the transfer portal. You can't be taking flyers on guys. You got to be getting proven commodities coming in. No more Malik Bensons, no more Marvin Jones Jr. Get guys that have shown they can do it at the collegiate level. Those are the guys you could write some checks to. Don't be writing checks to guys who are going into year 3, year 4, and haven't shown they can play. That's what you do at the high school ranks. We'll see and again, it's going to be a fun, exciting next couple of weeks for Florida State. I think we're going to see a lot of change. I think we're going to be talking about a lot of coaching staff change. I think we're going to be talking about a lot of personnel changes. And that should be welcomed to Florida State fans because whatever we're seeing every Saturday ain't cutting it. We'll sign out there. We'll continue this conversation again. Florida State fans, let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace.